juicy.net.
Hi readers, welcome to the Battle of the Books Quiz Center read aloud of the Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas. This is chapter 4. Warning, there will be profanity. I'm not sure there'll be profanity in this chapter, but I'm sure there will be in the book. Also, please follow along with me in your book with a highlighter pen, especially if you're practicing getting ready for the 2026 Oregon Battle of the Books competitions. Because if you follow with me in the book, my cat just knocked over the camera. Astro. Okay. So if you follow along with me as I highlight and discuss what parts I'm probably going to be making into questions, then you'll be all the more ready for this particular book. Okay. And I will be letting you know when I'm done with the quiz too. But I haven't even finished the book. I'm reading it with you. Chapter 4. Teo! A familiar voice called from the crowd. Waymack took a large step to the side a split second before Teo felt like he was hit by a bus. Teo let out a strangled yelp as he was scooped up off his feet in a vice-like hug. The force made his wing joints pop. Hi, Naya. He greeted her with a weak smile. At well over 6 feet tall, Naya had to look down as she beamed happily at Teo. Okay, so remember, Naya is his friend. I think it's his best friend, and she's a gold. Okay, so she's over 6 feet tall. In addition to her height, Naya was incredibly muscular, with broad shoulders and huge biceps. She had a heart-shaped face and prominent chin, with deep brown hair that was tied into 2 long braids. "Ay, Teo, you're so short. It was hard for me to find you," she scolded affectionately as her hazel eyes, the color of palm fronds and wet earth, danced with amusement. "I'm not short," he scowled. "And I think you bruised my ribs," he added, gingerly pressing a hand against them. She laughed, loud and unabashed. "Sorry." It was hard to stay mad at someone who was so warm and happy to see him. That, along with how little she understood personal space, made Naya a lot like a puppy, if said puppy were the size of a bull and able to break you in half with no effort. "Wait a second." Naya leaned into Teo again and sniffed his hair before jerking back. "You stink like smoke," she said, waving her hand in front of her nose. "The heck happened?" Teo tried to shove her, but Naya barely budged. Long story short, there was a fire in Quetzalon. I got a bit too close. "Oh no," Naya groaned dramatically. "Did the twins show up?" Teo nodded. She didn't need to know all the humiliating details. "That explains it. You smell just like them," Naya said with a smirk. Teo attempted to cover his hair with his hands. "No, I don't." "Well, I'm glad you didn't get roasted," she told him in typical Naya fashion. "I like this," she added, switching topics at breakneck pace as she petted the feathers of Teo's cape. "I feel like I've been tarred and feathered," Teo grumbled, pushing his circlet back into place. "Yours is..." He hesitated as he took in what Naya was wearing. Okay. Yours is... He hesitated as he took in what Naya was wearing. Barefoot, as usual, highlighting that she's usually barefoot, she wore a white wrap skirt that ended high on her absolutely massive thighs. Gold pendants the size of Teo's hand hung around her waist from a belt, engraved with the same glyph as the gold pectoral sitting on her chest. As the daughter of Tierra, okay, so Naya is the daughter of Tierra, the god of the earth. The glyph bore the likeness of 3 jagged mountains, highlighting all this, with the sun peeking from behind them. Matching discs adorned her ears, and gold bands sat above her thick biceps. "Dios, how are you not freezing?" Teo asked, laughter jumping in his throat. Naya cocked her hip and tossed her braid over her shoulder. "Listen, I'm shredded. It's not right to cover it up. It's bad enough they make me wear this." Scowling, she tugged on her white bandeau top. I don't see why my brothers can have their titties out, but I can't. Theirs are even bigger than mine, she announced loudly, throwing her hands up and getting looks from a group of nearby priests. There was no filter between Naya's head and her mouth. She just thought thoughts and said words. "Waymack," she exclaimed, eyes landing on the priest at Teo's side. "I missed you." When she spread her arms, Waymack's back went rigid. "Naya." It was supposed to be a hello, but it sounded more like a warning. When Teo and Naya became friends, Waymack took on the role of guardian for both of them whenever they were at Soul Temple. Naya had her own priest to look after her, of course, but Waymack seemed to be the only one she listened to. "I'm going to make my rounds," Waymack announced. "You two," he eyed Teo and Naya suspiciously, "for the love of Soul, please be on your best behavior." Naya's arms fell to her sides, bottom lip jutting. "Is he still mad about Dia de los Muertos?" she asked Teo, eyes following Waymack's retreating back. Teo shrugged. "Probably." "Come on, let's eat, and you can catch me up on things. Teo and Quetzalon, I want to know everything," she said, grabbing Teo's hand and dragging him to the food tables. He couldn't help but smiling. It was good to have his best friend back. Long tables piled high with steaming tamales and arepas lined the outer edges of the cavernous event hall. As they joined the buffet line, Teo eyed some yellow tortillas next to lines of juicy carne asada and spiced carnitas. Dios Maíz, the god of the harvest. Dios Maíz, the god of the harvest, and Diosa Pan Dulce, the sweet goddess of the hearth, had really outdone themselves. By the time Teo and Naya were ready to find their seats, he was struggling to balance the heaping tower of food on his plate. The Golds took up the larger tables around the main statue, while Jade squeezed into smaller ones around the outer edge. Teo couldn't help observing how the seating arrangements mirrored the placement of the cities across Reino del Sol. Naya didn't even hesitate to follow Teo to a small, rickety table on the outskirts. They passed Marino, who was dressed in a tunic accented with pastel coral pink seashells and polished white sea glass in every shade of blue imaginable. His mother, Diosa Agua, stood next to him. Okay, so Marino's mother is Diosa Agua. Her black skin glowed like the ocean under moonlight, her gray eyes glinting like abalone shells. The side of her head was shaved, and her blue hair tumbled over her shoulder like a waterfall. Teo filled Naya in on everything that he'd been up to that they hadn't covered over late-night texts. Naya had lived at the academy since she was 7. Highlighting that, Naya had lived at the academy since she was 7, so he couldn't go visit her, and when she got days off, she spent them with her dad's back home. Other than the fire, Quetzalon has been pretty boring, honestly, Teo confessed, as he sipped on fresh mango juice. Unless you count talking a flock of flamingos into relocating from the fountain in front of the city hall. "That sounds like fun to me," Naya said, but her enthusiasm dimmed when her gaze shifted past Teo's shoulder. "Ugh, great, here come the twins," she grumbled, angrily taking a bite of steak. Teo glanced back. Tension pinched his shoulders. Aurelio and Aristella descended the stairs side by side in matching black pants and sleeveless tunics with gold and red embroidery that imitated flames, closely followed by their mother. Large pectoral adornments made of real burning coals covered Aurelio and Aristella's chests. Chatter immediately broke out. In the world of half-gods, Aurelio and Aristella were basically royalty. Diosa Lumbre was the head of the academy, highlighting Diosa Lumbre was the head of the academy, and had a long line of semidioses who were not only famous heroes, but sunbearers. I think I'm going to highlight that whole thing. Diosa Lumbre was the head of the academy and had a long line of semidioses who were not only famous heroes, but sunbearers. Okay. Lumbre scanned the crowd, silently observing the priests and semidioses with eyes that smoldered with liquid fire. Every angle of her face was severe. Teo had never seen the goddess smile a day in her life. Diosa Lumbre was intimidating, sure, but Teo's loathing for her was so strong it canceled out any possible fear. Okay, Teo hates, loathing, hates. Teo's loathing for her was so strong. Her. Aurelio and Aristela moved through the crowd, greeting people as they passed. Chisme and Verdad pushed to the front, their photographers rapidly snapping pictures. So remember that Chisme and Verdad are the reporters. Aristela smiled and posed like some celebrity walking down the red carpet, talking animatedly with Chisme. Meanwhile, Aurelio stood by her side, looking stoic and maybe even a touch uncomfortable as lights flashed in his face. He adjusted his pectoral. Thin chains arched across the curve of his bicep from his signature golden armband to small loops hanging from the golden neckpiece. There was always something about Aurelio, the glow of his skin, the burning intensity of his eyes, that made Teo wonder if he was favored by Sol. They were all half gods, but it was like Aurelio had been touched by the sun itself. Like if Teo looked at him for too long, he'd burn up from the inside out. Someone called Aurelio's name, and he scanned the room. His eyes caught Teo's. It was only a second, long enough for recognition to flash across Aurelio's face and heat to burn in Teo's chest, before he quickly looked away. It was bad enough that Aurelio had just saved Teo's sorry ass from burning up in a fire. Now Teo had to watch him bask in all his golden glory at the trials too. When Teo stole another glance, Aurelio had already turned, swept up in a conversation with his sister. Teo turned back to Naya, desperate for a change of subject. How's the academy? Rough. They've been really kicking our asses, Naya said between bites of food. With the trials coming up, they've amped up training. We're doing drills constantly. She groaned, practically slumping on the table. They'll summon us during dinner or even in the middle of the night to run different disaster scenarios and rescues. Naya scrunched her face up in a scowl and imitated Diosa Lumbre's sharp, bossy voice. If you want to be in the trials, you need to train harder, move faster, get stronger. Only the best of the best will be chosen. When she put it like that, it was easier for him not to feel like he was missing out. Sounds like a pain in the ass if you ask me, Teo replied. She sighed deeply. It is, but Naya gave him a sheepish smile. I still love helping people. And competition, Teo added. She sat up straighter and grinned. I'm fourth in the class right now. Teo forced a smile, ignoring the heavy weight that dropped into his stomach. I'm really happy for you, Naya. He was proud of how well she was doing at the academy, but he was also scared. If she ranked fourth in the class, it seemed inevitable that she would be chosen for the trials. This worry had turned into a recurring nightmare for Teo, with the opening ceremony only a handful of hours away. He couldn't help feeling like the greatest fear was about to come true. Naya, Teo said carefully, do you want to be chosen for the trials? Naya bit her lip. I know they're just more stupid gold showboating, but they're also, important. I mean, it's an honor, right? To risk your life for this? Teo asked, gesturing around the room. This meaning the pomp and circumstance of it all, the gold. No, not for this, Naya said, shaking her head. For our people, to uphold soul sacrifice and keep Reino del Sol safe. Teo held his tongue. The worst possible scenario consumed his thoughts. His best friend laid on the altar at the end of the trials, and Teo unable to do anything but watch. Aye, look at the triad of douchebaggery is complete, Naya said, pulling him back to the present. Teo turned around to look at the latest semidiós to enter the hall, the twins' terrible sidekick, Ocelo. As they walked down the stairs, Ocelo's thickly muscled arms swung back and forth, like they were some kind of cartoon villain. Diosa Guerrero trailed behind their child. Okay, so Ocelo's Diosa Guerrero's child, with their jaguar head, yellow eyes, and battle-scarred face. Teo found Diosa Guerrero the most intimidating of the gods, highlighting, and he's got a jaguar head. Aurelio and Aristela were pompous elitists, yes, but Ocelo was an obnoxious narcissist. They were shorter than Teo, probably somewhere around 5'5", which was short for a demigod, but held themselves like they were 7 feet tall. They wore a red cape knotted on their left shoulder, draped diagonally across their body so as to display the glyph of a jaguar head. Their hair was always buzz short, and they decided to dye it like jaguar spots for the special occasion. Ocelo was the only semidiós whose physique came anywhere near rivaling Naya's. A small group of jade demigods chatted in a group, blocking Ocelo from where Chisme and Verdad were fawning over Aurelio and Aristella. Instead of asking them to move or just going around them like a normal person, Ocelo shouldered their way right through, sending the semidioses stumbling out of their way. Teo clenched his jaw, frustrated that Ocelo was able to get away with such blatant disrespect. But then he got an idea. Teo nudged Naya. "You thinking of what I'm thinking?" he asked under his breath. "No," she whispered back, "but whatever it is, I'm game." Teo pulled Naya with him, dodging people as they slunk to the edge of the stairs. Ocelo was nearly at the bottom when they crouched into position behind an unused table. Teo pinched Naya's elbow and pointed to where gold fasteners accented Ocelo's leather sandals. "Want to send them on a little trip down the stairs?" A wicked grin curled Naya's lips. Naya clenched her hand into a fist, and the pieces of gold shuddered. Quickly, she tugged, and the fasteners along with the shoes and feet inside them jerked. Ocelo stumbled, pitching forward and tumbling head over heels down the stairs. They landed in a heap at the foot of the steps. Red Cape flipped over their head. Gasps. Okay, I'm going to highlight that they did this. They undid his sandals and made him trip and fall all down the stairs. Ocelo. Gasps rose from the crowd, and the photographers swarmed, cameras flashing wildly. Ocelo thrashed until they freed themselves from their cape and leapt to their feet. They spun around, seething as their yellow-green eyes searched for the culprit. Teo and Naya dropped below their table, dissolving into fits of laughter. "Oh my God, I can't breathe," Naya said, arms wrapped around her stomach as she cackled. "Did you see their face?" "Pure gold," Teo agreed, wiping a tear from his eye. There was something so satisfying about seeing an asshole get what they deserved. Above, someone cleared their throat. Teo and Naya's laughter died as they looked up to find Huemak standing over them. He stared down at them, an exasperated expression on his face. The pair quickly jumped to their feet. "Not very graceful for a cat, huh, Huemak?" Teo said with solemn shake of his head. One of Huemak's bushy eyebrows arched. "They could have gotten hurt." "They didn't, though, see?" Naya said, gesturing at Ocelo, who was red-faced and stomping away. "Yeah, nothing but their ego," Teo added, trying to hold back a laugh. Naya nodded, probably why they fell over in the first place. "Big head," Teo agreed, "very top-heavy." Actions have more than your intended consequences, Huemak said. "Tell that to Ocelo and their whole," Teo gestured vaguely, "everything." "Ocelo is not my responsibility," Huemak said tersely, "or obliged to follow my rules. I don't think either of your parents would be happy about this." Naya was immediately shamefaced, but Teo was just frustrated. Ocelo never got in trouble for being a dick. How was that fair? Luckily, before Huemak could dole out any sort of punishment, crowds started moving toward the stairs. "Looks like it's time to head up for the ceremony," Huemak said, scanning the room. "Finally," Naya said, grinning from ear to ear as she grabbed Teo's arm and gave it an excited shake. Teo's stomach rolled. He stuck to Naya's side, following Huemak and the rest of the crowd as they started the long trek up the stairs to the top of the temple where Diosa Luna waited for them at Sol's altar. "If you'd all gather round, we'll get the ceremony started," Luna announced. Diosa Luna had coily dark hair streaked with silvery gray, an hourglass figure, and dark, cool brown skin. Crow's feet sat at the corners of her eyes, wrinkling as she smiled at everyone gathered. The dress she wore had a plunging neckline that started out midnight blue at her shoulders and faded to a starry silver where it pooled at her sandaled feet. It was covered in tiny pinpricks of silver that mirrored the stars and constellations in the night sky. The rays of her sunburst necklace stretched out across her shoulders and clavicles, marking her as the high priestess of Sol Temple. So this is Diosa Luna, is the high priestess of Sol Temple. Luna was the dioses of the moon, giving her the power to reflect the voice of Sol. Naya went off to be with her dad, and Teo went to his mom, standing with some of the other jade gods. This way, Teo, Quetzal said, waving him forward, but before he could follow, Mala Suerte stepped into his path. Remember, Mala Suerte means bad luck. Good luck, Teo, he grinned, giving Teo's arm a squeeze before wandering off, his brood in tow and Shio sticking close to his side. I can never tell if he's messing with me or not, Teo said to his mom as they joined the crowd gathering around the altar. I think most of it is just for show, Quetzal agreed, with a sad sort of sigh. If people treat you like you're bad for long enough, I imagine you start believing it. Or, as I think might be the case with Suerte, playing it up for fun. As they got into position, Teo craned his neck in search of Naya. He found her on the other side of the room, bouncing on the balls of her feet, practically vibrating with excitement. Tierra stood behind her with her older brothers, Monte and Mino, highlighting that Monte and Mino are Naya's older brothers, who flanked them like sentinels. Dios Tierra wore a black suit with gold embroidered accents that reflected his glyph and a crimson tie, leather gloves, and a simple gold mask that cast his eyes in shadow covered his skinless flesh. Ew. Dios Tierra has no skin. Wait. Mask that cast his eyes in shadow covered his skinless flesh. Yeah, I guess his whole body has no skin. The last person you need to worry about is Naya, Quetzal told Teo, smoothing her hand down his covered wings. She will do just fine. I know, Teo said as he watched his best friend greet her family. Naya said something to Monte, who grinned and bounced his pecs in turn. Naya punched his arm while Mino threw his head back with a bark-like laugh. Dioses and semidioses, Luna said, her voice carrying over the crowd, which immediately hushed. A younger soul priest stood next to her, interpreting what she was saying in sign language. That's cool. A younger soul priest stood next to her, interpreting what she said in sign language. Diose Sol and I welcome you to Sol Temple to celebrate the end of this decade and the start of the next. She lifted her hands to the Sol Stone, which silently churned and glowed with golden light. Luna smiled and pressed her palms together. This is a time to give thanks to Sol for the good fortune they have brought us and to remember all they have given so that we may live. Every 10 years, the sun's power must be replenished so that Sol can continue their path through the sky, keeping our world safe from the obsidians and monsters that have been locked in their celestial bindings. I know this has already been discussed, but I'm going to highlight it again because it's really important. The whole reason that they do the Sunbearer Trials every 10 years. The sun's power must be replenished so Sol can continue their path through the sky, keeping our world safe from obsidians and monsters that have been locked in their celestial bindings. 10 eligible semidioses between the ages of 13 and 18 are selected. Okay, I didn't remember this being mentioned before. So, how many semidioses will be chosen to be in the Sunbearer Trials to compete against each other? 10. And they'll all be between the ages of 13 and 18. Are selected as the worthiest to compete in the Sunbearer Trials. The winner will be chosen by Sol as this decade's Sunbearer and join the distinguished ranks of our past champions. Luna gestured to where a line of semidioses stood, all wearing gold sunburst crowns. They were all golds, of course, and Diosa Lumbre's glyph was the most common, hanging around their necks. Okay, so not only are all the past champions of the Sunbearer Trials, they're semidioses, and they all wore gold sunburst crowns. I think that's like identifies them as Sunbearer winners, champions, and they're all golds. And most of them are Diosa Lumbre's children. They ranged in age from the youngest, Bria, who was 27, to Arnau, a semidiós of Dios Guerrero, who was 148. Our Sunbearer will travel through Reino del Sol and refuel the sunstones at each city's temple. Luna paused long enough to let her gaze travel around the open-air observatory. But it is the semidiós who becomes the sacrifice who has the greatest honor of all. Oh boy. When you're chosen to be the sacrifice, that means you get to die. What an honor. Okay. Teo shifted uneasily next to his mother. He'd heard this story enough times to know what came next. What had kept him up late at night these past weeks, leading up to the Sunbearer Trials. What made him terrified of Naya being chosen to compete. To be sacrificed to Sol and have their body melted into the elixir that will refuel the sunstones so they can continue to provide safety and protection to all of us for the next 10 years. Diosa Luna approached the altar and stood next to the cloth-covered rectangle. In one swift movement, she unveiled what was underneath. The sacrificial stone slab was covered in intricate engravings of the sun and webs of constellations. It rested on top of a stack of golden skulls. They all belonged to past semidioses who had died in sacrifice to keep the sunstones burning. After Tierra melted their bodies, he saved their skulls, plated them in gold, and engraved their names in thin script around the forehead. Highlighting this. Teo looked back to the line of former Sunbearers. They did not turn to face the skulls of the dead. Just as we honor Sol, we owe our lives to the semidioses who sacrificed themselves to remind us what they gave so all of us may live, Luna said. Without this sacrifice, Reino del Sol would fall into inevitable destruction. Teo clenched his hands into fists, willing his knees not to shake. It sounded so noble, but Teo didn't want his best friend to end up among the pile of skulls. Someone had to keep the world from ending, just not Naya. Dioses, Luna said, looking out into the crowd, please present your children for Sol's selection. As everyone around him started to move, Teo froze. Don't worry, Pajarito, his mom said, her soft feathers brushing his cheek as she kissed the top of his head. You'll be fine. He knew she was right, but it wasn't his fate he was worried about. Teo's movements were mechanical as he followed the other semidioses, forming a ring around the soul stone floating above their heads. Okay, so it's all the dioses, the gods' children, who are semidioses, all in a big circle around the sunstone, and then we'll find out who gets picked. The 10 that get picked. Teo desperately searched for Naya and spotted her across the way. She smiled and gave Teo a small wink. All he could do was stand there between two other jades, cacti, highlighting child of the goddess of agave, and Juanita, daughter of the god of lost things, rooted to the floor. Sweat prickled his brow and ran down the middle of his back under his binder. He tried to steady his breathing to avoid fainting right there in front of everyone. Silence hung thick as they all waited. Gradually, a hum filled the air, and the soul stone grew brighter, pulsing in time with Teo's thundering heartbeat. I wonder if the soul stone itself chooses. Because if so, it must have like a magical ability to know everything, and it'll know that Teo was the true hero in that fire. A flash of light sparked to Teo's left. A sunburst crown appeared on Ocelo's buzzed head. A wicked grin cut their features as they basked in the honor of being the first one selected by Sol. Dios Guerrero beamed proudly, their fangs glinting. Okay, so Ocelo is the first semidiós to get picked. He's one of the 10 to compete in the Sunbearer Trials. With another flash of light, a crown appeared on Marino's head. That was no surprise. The water semidiós let out a breath, shoulders slumping in relief. A third flash and a crown appeared on Auristella's head. Also, not a surprise, I'm sure Aurelio's coming too. She sucked in a gasp, nearly jumping with excitement, before she seemed to remember herself and returned to standing with arms held straight at her sides. Still, Teo saw the corners of her mouth twitch in a surprised grin. Beside her, Aurelio didn't so much as flinch. His expression remained unreadable as he stared up at the sunstone, waiting. For a moment, Teo wondered if Aurelio was jealous of his sister, but then there was another flash of light. A gleaming crown appeared on Aurelio's head. See, I knew he'd be chosen. His eyelids fluttered in relief. He would have been really embarrassed if his twin sister got picked and he didn't. Aristella latched onto her brother's wrists, doing her best to trap her grin between her teeth. The crowd broke out in hushed chatter. Even Teo's lips parted in surprise. A set of siblings, let alone twins, had never been selected to compete in the trials in the same year, as far as he knew. The confused and surprised expressions around the room confirmed his suspicion. Diosa Lumbre, however, didn't seem at all shocked. In fact, she stood motionless, almost bored. A strange feeling that Teo couldn't define churned in his stomach as he watched Aurelio. He hadn't let himself think of it before tonight, but here it was, impossible to look away from. Aurelio would be competing in the Sunbearer Trials. Something's going on between Aurelio and Teo. I don't know what it is yet. I feel like maybe they had a relationship before, but I don't know. There's something going on. Okay, Teo shook his head at himself. Now was not the time to worry over Aurelio's fate. See, he's got some sort of worry about Aurelio. Teo pushed his feather circlet up out of his eyes, only to realize his hands were trembling. One by one, 3 more gold semidioses were selected. When Otzi, the 13-year-old rain semidiosa, was chosen, Teo could hear the improving rumble of thunder from her father, Tormentoso. Next was Xochi, the semidioses of spring, dressed in flowers. Her mother, Primavera, excitedly hugged her diosa sisters. The estaciones, the goddesses of the seasons, were a tight-knit group of tias who absolutely fawned over Xochi. Desi, the son of diosa Amor, was also selected. Teo didn't know much about him other than that he was astoundingly gorgeous. In the center of his tunic, he bore his mother's glyph, an anatomical heart on fire. There were only 3 spots left. For a moment, Teo let himself hope. Maybe Naya wouldn't be chosen, and then they'd get to spend the next 10 days together, watching the trials and getting sick on candy. Not Naya, not Naya, not Naya. But that hope was short-lived. In a flash of light, a sunburst crown appeared. In a flash of light, a sunburst crown sparked from Naya's head. Teo's heart clenched. A huge smile lit up Naya's face, and she immediately turned to her brothers, who clapped and whooped, ignoring the customary silence. Meanwhile, Tierra's gloved hands gripped his tie. The back of Teo's throat burned as he tried to swallow. He couldn't panic, not while he was standing in a room full of people. It wasn't a guaranteed death sentence, he tried to remind himself. This was Naya. She didn't lose anything, especially not the trials. She'd be okay. She just needed to get through it and not come in last place. So that's the thing. The last place is the one that gets sacrificed. A flash of light far too close, snapped Teo from his thoughts. This time, surprised voices erupted from the crowd. Heads swiveled. The newly selected semidiós was only 2 people down from his left, and it was... A shot jolted through him. The large crown sitting atop Shio's curly hair made him look so small compared to the golds. Shio? But he was a jade. The world beneath Teo's feet seemed to lurch. He turned back to his mom to find her looking as shocked as he felt, her brows pinched in confusion. Another flash, too close, too bright, and disorienting. Teo squinted. Across the circle, Naya stared at him, alarmed. I know what's coming. Do you know what's coming? I know you know what's coming. For some reason, he sought out Aurelio. The boy's lips were softly parted, eyes wide and looking right at him. The most emotion Teo had seen on Aurelio's face in years. Over the growing noise of the crowd, Teo heard his mom gasp, but he didn't know why. He turned to her, but felt a sudden shift of weight on his head. He went to push his feather circlet back into place, but when Teo reached up, His fingers touched the cold rays of a sunburst crown. I knew it. I must be clairvoyant. Ha! Or I just figured it out with a, educated guess because of him saving the woman in the fire and the little girl's doll, just being brave enough to go in there. And not for the fame, not for the glory, not for money, nothing. He just wanted to, he could not walk away from the fire and leave people to die. And the Sunbearers competitors were not chosen by people. They were chosen by the orb, the sunstone. So the sunstone knows all. That is the end of chapter 4. I'm getting excited. Okay. I hope you are too. Till next time, keep reading.
You read the books, now ready, get set at BOBQC.net. You read the books, now ready, get set at BOBQC.net.